Hello, this is Nick from Prog and Power Unite, and I am talking today with Mason Rouser and Joseph Tingle, our two big site contributors, and we are doing something totally new here. We're going to do a little bit of discussion on some recent music news and some bad concert experiences and just some general musical topics. And we are going to start with a band that definitely ties us all together, Dream Theater. Now, when we originally came up with the idea to do this, they had just released some emails to fans, but have since released a lot more details. The title of the new album is going to be The Astonishing. It's going to be a double album. It's going to be a rock opera. And what we're going to be focusing on to start is the marketing campaign behind the album, which involves Twitter, involves joining a faction of sorts. And Joe, let's start with you. What do you think of the take in trying to create some hype for the new album?
Well, I've got to say, when I got the emails, I guess a couple days ago, I was pretty put off by the whole thing. Just the idea that I have this huge wall of text from the Emperor Nefarious of the Great Northern Emperor.
Great Northern Empire.
Great Northern Empire. Yeah, it just completely caught me off guard. And now that big wall of ornate text is kind of starting to, now that that's been out for a while and we're starting to see the other details trickle in, I'm starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with this whole thing. I really like the idea that Dream Theater are building hype behind one of their albums again, and it's kind of like this big event. I don't feel like we got that with Self-Titled a couple years ago, where I don't remember what they did. Maybe one of you guys can remind me, but I think they previewed artwork leading up to the album.
Yeah, I believe that's what they did do. I think they released little chunks of the artwork bit by bit leading up to the release.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool that this is such a major event. Now, I'm still a little bit suspicious of the concept, but I guess until we know more, it'll be hard to really judge whether Dream Theater can pull off this big fantasy rock opera thing that I think it is.
All right. Well, Mason, I know you definitely have some ideas on the fantasy aspects of Dream Theater, so why don't you run with it from there and tell us what you think about all this?
Well, the fact that they're doing a rock opera actually sounds promising and interesting to me. They pulled off the Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory, pretty well. It's not one of my favorite albums, but I know I'm in the minority on that. In terms of the marketing, I'm a scientist and I'm a show me person. All this trying to hype it up, I want a good product in the end. The last album, Dream Theater 12, was honestly very poorly produced for a band like Dream Theater. It has the resources and the intellect to do a good sounding album. And, Dream Theater 12 is very hard to listen to. They can do all this interesting stuff, but in the end, if the CD, the music I don't want to listen to it, it's kind of a waste. So I don't get into the hype like I used to. I think they can pull off, yes, I think, they can probably have a chance to pull off a classic album. The one thing that I'm a little concerned about is on the website, they have the characters, and it looks like there's going to be 8 characters. Is James going to sing all 8 characters?
Well, actually, on that point, an interesting part about the marketing that might tie into that I find really hopeful is the fact that they're already promoting that they're going to play this big long album in full on tour. And what I think that potentially means, if they're going to go all out on this, I'm hoping that means that they're going to bring outside artists in for the album. They're going to play all these songs on tour now. We might not see them down the road much, but I can see potentially outside singers on this album and maybe even on this tour.
Yeah, and that's what I want. Oh, sorry, Joe. That's honestly what I want.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it is kind of ironic that they're doing this now when James is just getting back from the Theater Equation shows.
Yes, and I'd say the two things I've seen so far in regards to the story and how it's being done, the two quickest and definite comparisons, one is Arion for obvious reasons, and the other is Rush's song 2112, because the original emails that were sent out on November 2nd, the story that's taking shape definitely seems to follow 2112 to some degree.
And November 2nd, 112, there's 3 of the 4 numbers. Sorry.
I'm hoping they're not that blatant that it's not actually.
Yeah.
So how do you guys feel about fantasy in Dream Theater?
Well, I'm torn because I love fantasy. I love Arion. I love it when it's done well. My problem with the email campaign so far, you go up on their website, you sign up your email for one of two factions, and we got these emails kind of outlining the start of the story. I think it's cool. I think the hype machine is cool. I like the build-up. I think it is, by the first emails being pretty horribly done, it reads terribly.
It put me off for sure.
Yeah. I struggled to finish it myself.
I like the idea. So far, I'm not totally sold on the execution.
Here's my thing, because I think both of you, I know you are, Nick, and I think you are as well, Mason, both pretty much like longtime Dream Theater fans. And and I remember when I first became a fan, which I guess was when 6 Degrees came out or so. There was always a stigma out there from other people who didn't like Dream Theater that they were like really cheesy, that their songs weren't emotional, and that they were just kind of this like geeky, cheesy, nerdy prog metal band. And I remember always having to kind of beat that back and say, no, go listen to Awake or listen to 6 Degrees, and there's a lot of depth to them, a lot of emotion in the songs. And it just seems like over the last few years, slowly, the band have gotten like more fantastic and grandiose and just kind of turned into what I always felt like I had to defend them against. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I don't know if I necessarily agree. I mean, maybe just the songs I personally have liked on their past few albums. The songs that I enjoyed from Dream Theater 12 were the ones where, John was, opening it, Petrucci, not Mayan, he doesn't write much. He's opening up and just being honest about his opinions with the world. And songs like Forsaken have, fallen, by the wayside for me. But, all that said, maybe it's time for them to try this new direction. They haven't done anything like this since 1999 when Scene from Memory came out, and hopefully they will also, if there's a Dream Theater 14, give them time to write good songs, because that was my main criticism of 12, was that there were about 3 songs that were really good, and 6 just felt like Dream Theater by numbers, and just I usually like when bands kind of stick within, hey, this sounds like Dream Theater, this sounds like Circus Maximus. But, there's also, I would say mailed in, but, there was, felt like a lack of creativity on 12 at parts, I thought.
Okay.
Hopefully that gets fixed on this new one.
Yeah, and one thing I think would be important to note is I think when you have a song or like an album like Black Clouds and Silver Linings, you have some deeply personal songs like Wither and The Best of Times, and then you have The Count of Tuscany, which I think is an incredible track, but it kind of sticks out as a lyrical. There's definitely a disconnect there within the album.
Yeah.
I think the sci-fi concept will work a lot better when it's really delved into, and that is the album, and it doesn't have that jarring change of lyrics from one song to the next.
Yeah, and I have nothing against fantasy or sci-fi concepts. I should clarify that, because I love Arion, I love Blind Guardian. I just saw them on Sunday. It's just, for me, when I first got into Dream Theater, I never associated them with that sort of thing. And just over the years between the Forsakens and Dark Eternal Night and In the Presence of Enemies and Count of Tuscany, and just these things have started to add up. And, even with all that established, it still seems like this is a big jump for Dream Theater, just to jump into this, complete fantasy sci-fi type album. But they're putting a lot of effort into it. Maybe it'll work. It's going to take me a minute to get into gear and think of Dream Theater as a band that do these kind of albums.
Yeah, and again, I think that leads credence to the idea that it's, they're going to jump full in, they're going to hit it hard on this tour, and then they might really back off from it. I think it might just be, going all out, and then they kind of have it out of their system, or that they've done it in a way.
Yeah, so are they debuting the album on the tour? I wasn't clear on that.
I believe they
are. I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe they were. They haven't released the release date, but they have tour dates, and I'm guessing, just based on when those tour dates are, that those tour dates are going to be before release date, because I don't think they're going to release
I
album without on 3 months notice at this point.
Yeah, I can't imagine that they would have shows playing an album in full that isn't released yet. That would just seem rather silly.
It seems silly, but they haven't. I've never seen a band put an album, announce a release date only 1 or 2 months ahead of time, and these shows are booked in February, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's essentially you want that album out in January, so that's 3 months, and they haven't released a release date. I would think they would want to, if they're going to start this hype machine, put a release date out. So I'm guessing, just based off of what I've seen about release dates with other bands, that they're going to start touring this without, and that would be interesting. Although it, like you said, it's really weird to go see a band and have them debut a song that people haven't heard, and they just kind of it's hard to get into.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, though, one thing is clear: the PR machine on this one is obviously very huge, and I'm sure they know exactly when they're going to release the release day, as odd as that sounds.
Yeah.
I'm sure everything is very choreographed over the next month or 2 or 3 or 4. It's going to probably run according to a very strict schedule. So that let's wrap that up there on the new Dream Theater.
I'd like to add, I do like the album name. I've heard some people kind of I would say kind of wishy-washy on it, but I like it. It's different, and it's it's going to take them in a new direction, I think, and so it's I like it. One of the few things that I've been really encouraged about so far about this whole campaign.
And at the end of the day, I feel about the album name like you feel about the PR machine. As long as the music's good in the end, I really don't care.
Yeah, I can't think of many Dream Theater album names where I've heard the name, what the album's going to be called, and thought, oh, that sounds really awesome. I think every time they've announced a new album name, I've been a little bit ambiguous about it.
Particularly like the last few, just been kind of like, I like the dramatic turn of events. The album is an album name that's just kind of weird. You're using your self-titled album as a 12th album. That's just, that's usually debut album stuff for people.
Doing a self-titled album that late in your career is just an absolute do not do in my book. I was very upset about it. I was upset when Queensryche did it as well. I think that's just bad form. You just don't do it. Motley Crue did it. I'm sure there's other bands that did, but I just don't like it. You either do it on the debut or you don't do it. Those are your two options. But let's wrap up from Dream Theater. Let's move on to another band that has announced a left turn for their next album. Not nearly as many details are available on this, but let me read you a Facebook post from Pain of Salvation. Swedish progressive rock innovators Pain of Salvation have kept busy working on various new recording projects ever since their latest release, the semi-acoustic album Falling Home, from November 2014. Having just returned from some successful shows in Russia, Pain of Salvation have now also announced a string of shows in the Netherlands and Italy. So they have some tours coming up, but the important fact that was released in the announcement was that the next album is going to be returned to the heavier early days of the band. So, Mason, what do you think about Pain of Salvation bringing the heavy back?
Thank God. I, really did not get into the Rogue Salt albums much. I listened to it a few times when they came out, but they never stuck in rotation. Today, because of the announcement, I listened to The Perfect Element 1 and was just like hell yeah, this is the good stuff. This is what I missed about them. And then I just went right into Remedy Lane, and if it truly is a return to form for them, that's honestly what I think they need. That's where their sweet spot is. I don't mind bands trying new things, but Opeth's last two albums, Gag, sometimes I don't know if that whole trying something new works for some bands. I don't think it worked for Pain of Salvation. They didn't quite fall as flat as Opeth, but if they're going back to that old, first 5 or 6 albums, then that's.
Well, I think specifically they're trying to go back to like the first 1 or 2. I mean, they're trying to go all the way back. Yeah, and that's good. I love An Hour by a Concrete Lake. They're that's one of my 3 favorite albums. But no, 4th. Sorry. Personally, I definitely disagree with you on the Roadside albums. I think the Roadside albums are fantastic. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of the eras of Pain of Salvation are fantastic. So really, I am not uninterested in the news, but I have confidence in Daniel Gildenlow as a musician in the studio. I think live, with all the member changes, they have definitely suffered in the Road Salt years. I think the studio output's been fine, but I think the live output suffered. But I have confidence in the next few album. What about you, Joe?
I hope that it's a self-titled album.
Go to hell, Joe.
No, but seriously. Well, okay, so it's supposed to be a concept album. I've heard that. I don't know if that was in the Facebook post, but I think Daniel said that as well. I'm excited about them going back to heavier material. I wasn't a huge fan of Road Salt. I thought the first one was good, and I thought the second one was good as well, but by that point it was a little bit too much of the retro sound for me. But for me, disappointment in Pain of Salvation didn't really begin with Road Salt. It began with Scarsick. I just really felt that album was hard to connect with. So, and that one was still pretty heavy, but it wasn't as, kind of like a pure progressive metal album as their first couple. So I'm pumped to hear what they do going back to it. Now, they're completely, like you mentioned, they're a completely different band than they were. So it'll be interesting how this kind of like Daniel run show is able to do a Pain of Salvation record. But
well, let's be clear. It was always a Daniel run show, but in the Roadside albums, he took over studio parts that he certainly seemed to have left to the old members more often than not. And in the Roadside albums, he really took over just doing a lot of the studio work. Yeah, and did he do most of it on Scarsick too, do you think, or do you know? I don't know, but I don't believe so. That there was, I believe one member changed part of Scarsick, but that's still pretty much the band as it was traditionally known. No, the honestly, the thing that kind of worries me about Pain of Salvation, Dan has not been in great health lately. I don't know if it's bad luck or what, but I mean, he was I won't say replaced in Transatlantic, but Ted kind of took over for him there. They had to cancel some shows due to his health issues on their last tour. So that's a little bit of a concern. I mean, everyone's getting older, but maybe it's just the stress of trying to put too much on his plate with Road Salt, and maybe going back and letting the band members do what they're there to do more. Just I don't know what it is with his health that he seemed to be having a bad stretch, and Well, right there, you definitely brought up a whole another topic for a future episode, which is the future of Transatlantic, Daniel Gildenlow or Ted Leonard. But we'll have that discussion another day. With his health, the one major bit of his health, there's nothing you could do about it. He caught a disease that was rare, completely out of the blue. It did devastate him. He wasn't expecting to miss as much time as he did, and had to slowly come to terms with how much time he'd actually be losing. But I don't necessarily think that's related to the stress in the studio. I think he had some unfortunate incidents, but I don't feel that was any way connected to the music, or at least I hope not, that it's not that much of a stress to him.
A general comment I would like to make is I really am excited to see the end of this. I guess it's a trend where all these bands decide to go through their classic rock phase.
I'm
retro
sick. I'm done with
phase.
I'm sick of it.
Yeah, and it's not. I have nothing against it, and some artists have done it really well. Like I would argue that Steven Wilson even kind of went through a little bit of a retro phase with Raven and Grace for Drowning, and I thought those were both really great albums. But to have Pain of Salvation and Opeth and several other bands just get Royal Hunt all just kind of stuck in this 70s prog time capsule thing. I'm just really eager to see the end of that and to see this band start to try and push forward again.
Yeah, there are good 70s, retro bands out there, but that's what they are. That's their sound, and I like it.
I think like Big Elf is a huge retro band. Beardfish, huge retro band. And they do it great.
And they sound great. They sound great. It's not that I dislike the retro sound. Knife World is one that I was really latched onto last year. And there are some other ones. Person, I saw them open for Ghost a few weeks ago. They're the most retro band I've seen, and they dress like the 70s. Mm-hmm. And check out the lead singer too. Pretty easy on the eyes, but if that's your thing, you do it well. But whenever these bands try to, go back and pay homage to what they grew up with, it just doesn't. The songwriting is just not there because that's not what they do, I think.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take that. I'm going to run out of order here a little bit and take us to another thing that we wanted to talk about, which is the recent surge of a few bands who've been on late night or have had some flashes of success with pop culture. The most recent was Ghost, who got to perform a song on the Late Show with Steven Colbert, which was a huge for a band that maybe 5 years ago no one knew about and is having a huge upturn in success here as of late. So, Mason, you're the resident Ghost fan. What did you think of the performance?
The performance was great. I liked how they had some actors kind of come out like ghouls, so it wasn't just them playing. I wasn't happy that they kind of had to do a radio edit. It was definitely a shorter version of the song with some of the instrumental bits cut, and I wasn't a fan of how it was presented with like the whole old-timey TV thing. But they sounded great. I saw them on tour a few weeks ago. They were awesome live. They're not quite Alice Cooper stage show, but you do get a little bit of theatrics with the band, and they put on a really great performance, and Poppy Emeritus is super friendly. He's you can get your picture with him after the show if you want. And I've been a big fan of them since their debut album. I just really like what they do, and the whole tongue-in-cheek, Satan stuff. It's kind of like it's the 80s metal that your parents imagined that Iron Maiden was. Because when I grew up, Iron Maiden was like no one like even the bad kids weren't even on a list of Iron Maiden.
You listen to Iron Maiden, you're going to start doing drugs.
Yeah, because Number of the Beast and like everyone, all of us who are educated on Iron Maiden know that that's not them. They're
not at
very
all.
intelligent. They're not. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not heavy drug users. I think
if you're listening to this show, you're probably preaching to the choir on that one.
Yeah, good point. But I love the whole tongue-in-cheek, spiel with them, and it's a nice little niche. No one else has it, and it's I can't recommend their albums enough. I love them, but I thought their show on Colbert song on Colbert was for the most part representative of what they do, and hopefully they get some some good things coming from it. And there's also some bad that's going to come with it, which I will talk about later.
And a couple of your points, can't even be blamed necessarily on Ghost. The edit, obviously, the time they had to cut down. The TV effects, it was a Halloween, I want to say gimmick, but that's why they had them on at that time. And, that kind of fit that theme, and that was probably the network choosing to do that. And, I thought it sounded like they had some pre-recorded parts, which, again, typical and very typical for a TV performance like that. So most of my complaints about it were things that probably weren't Ghost's choice. And as we're talking about metal pop culture, that's one of those things that happens when you meet pop culture. Sometimes you have things happen or have decisions made that you don't necessarily like, but in the name of exposure, you got to kind of do it.
Yeah, I agree, but it's still kind of...
Joe, do you want to add anything? I know you were kind of the outside. You had, I believe, very little introduction to Ghost prior to this.
No, I did watch it. I felt like it was a pretty good performance. I'm still not big on the whole Ghost gimmick. It's a little off-putting to me. Just I've never really listened to many bands that do have that kind of gimmick. I will say for that performance, it looked like Colbert was a little uncomfortable with it. I don't know if anyone else got that vibe from him.
Well,
I have to check it again.
To be fair, if Colbert is uncomfortable, I'm okay with it, because on his old show, typically the musical guests were never very good, except for, of course, Rush, who were excellent. But typically, I've never found him or Stewart to have the greatest musical guests in the world. So if he's uncomfortable with it, I'm actually pretty happy about it. But just a quick note, we're going to have, just like if you're listening to this, there's going to be an accompanying text with the podcast if you're a podcast listener or whatever. And we'll have the video in there. We'll have links to stuff we talked about, like the PM Salvation post, Dream Theater news, all that sort of stuff. So definitely if you're listening and you want to find out more, you will be able to go into the show notes and certainly do so. So real quick, anything else on Ghost?
Boo.
If you haven't got their albums, go get them.
Simple enough. All right. Another band that Mason is definitely the expert on here, that he got me and Joe to listen to, surprisingly, and I'm okay with having listened to it, is Trivium, who just released a new album called Silence in the Snow. Now, Mason has been following them for some time. I will follow them maybe from this album on, depending on how the next one is, but tell us why this one's different, Mason.
So, about a year and a half ago, actually, the singer for Trivium, Matt Heafy, had some voice problems. And, so this album was kind of a result of the No Harsh Lyrics, which is, I think, why you weren't interested in them
Absolutely
before,
correct.
and which is why I suggested this album to you. One of the first things that really stands out about this album is that it's really well produced. Which, a lot of albums these days don't seem to have it. The production on the album is excellent. And, we're not listening to albums because they're well produced, but, fully produced album is a huge turnoff. So that was a huge plus. Matt Heafy's cleans have gotten much better. They're really good. I just really enjoy his singing on this album, compared to some of the other ones. His cleans were, serviceable, but now, if they ditched, the harsh vocals, I would be okay with that. And that's the exact opposite stance I have with Opeth. Opeth needs to go back and do them.
Well, now, Joe...
The clean vocals aren't working for me with Opeth.
I know the clean vocals for you, Joe, along with probably the clean production. I know you said that you think maybe that gives the album now, or the band, a little lack of punch.
Yeah, I'm not as big of a Trivium fan as Mason, but I did, I really like the album, The Ascendancy, and I also like Shogun a lot. And when In Waves came out, I listened to that one, and I think they just started to sound like a lost band. And this album, I don't know, I did give it a chance, and it feels like they're kind of starting to turn the corner. I think a lot of bands, when these kind of like heavier bands, when they start to go clean vocals, they start to lose something and become a little bit more vanilla. And I got that sense a little bit from In Waves, as well as the album that they released before this new one, which I don't remember the name of.
Vengeance Falls.
Vengeance Falls, that's right. With this one, I feel like they're starting to kind of find their new niche, so to speak. So I'm a little optimistic about it. I went in not expecting much, and I think they may have kind of got their footing back, and I'll be excited to hear what they do next.
Okay, yeah, and for me, I was definitely completely. I had listened to Trivium previously and quickly discounted them because I have no interest in the vocals, and the music has to be really, really good for me to discount those vocals if they're there, and it wasn't for me. The new album, to me, I think it has some good stuff. I think it has some bad stuff. I'm happy I listened to it. It's a good album, not necessarily, I wouldn't say great, and
No, it's not great.
I'm going to say something about this album that I don't know if I will have ever said before or will ever say again, and that is that with the very clean production, and at times, because of how it sounds, when the album sounds a little bit like Avenged Sevenfold, that's when it's at its best. And that will probably be the last time I utter that phrase.
I've never listened to Avenged Sevenfold. Even with Portnoy, I don't know why. There's something about, I don't say popular American metal bands, for some reason, just don't, like Disturbed. I just, Godsmack, can't get into them.
Well, I wouldn't put it Disturbed anywhere near the same area as Avenged, and I'm not an Avenged expert by any means, but I've heard a few of their albums, and there are elements there that were similar between that and the Trivium album, and those were the ones I enjoyed most.
Yeah, I started to get into Avenged a little bit when Portnoy, quote unquote, joined, and as soon as he left, my interest fell off pretty quickly.
Okay. Well, now we started off this discussion with Dream Theater, a band that we all have in common. We're going to go back to a band now that we all very much love. They put out an album a while back called The Book of Souls, and that is Iron Maiden. A huge undertaking, much like Dream Theater is doing. Their first double album after a gazillion years. Dream Theater is doing their second double album, the first rock opera. But a huge undertaking by a band that at this point could fall asleep on their pile of money pillows and be happy. But Joe, what did you think of it?
I like it. I liked almost everything Iron Maiden have done. The only issue I have with it is it's this big double album from Iron Maiden, and I can't think of many things to say about it. It's just like any other Iron Maiden album, just longer. So I think it's good. But there's very little that stands out on it to me. It's a solid Iron Maiden record.
Well, I would disagree there. Well, I think some parts of it slip into that, sort of typical Iron Maiden mold. The first, the longest song they've ever done, Empire of the Clouds, or In the Clouds, and the opening track have a lot of things in them that you really haven't seen, or at least haven't seen done as well before, nearly as well in Iron Maiden's music, and I think those type of things really set it apart.
Well, I guess, there are things that stand out here and there. The thing that did stand out to me was there's like an 18-minute song about a blimp that crashes, which only Iron Maiden can do that. No other band can get away with that, but...
Well, the problem was the blimp was being followed by an albatross.
That's right.
Now, Mason, I know you have some thoughts on the album. What's your take?
I really enjoyed it for the most part. Kind of like Joe said, it's sometimes it can feel like it's a long listen, but the other part of it is like I don't know what songs I would cut to make it a one-length album, except for Steelite, which, I thought that was, one of the weaker songs, and of course that was the lead single. I really enjoyed Empire of the Clouds, and Book of Souls and Red and the Black. Of course, this happened to be the longer songs of the album. They got away from the no more lies, really repetitive,
I think that's something that I and a lot of Maiden fans can really agree with you on, and I had said it when we did the album as our feature a couple months ago, whatever it is, was that there really was very little repetitiveness in the chorus or in the music, and that was definitely a big, refreshing change.
Yeah, and I'm honestly a big fan of reunion era Maiden. I think the classic stuff's better live, but if I had to pick an album to listen to or 5 albums to listen to, I'd probably pick the 5. I'd probably pick the 5 or 6 reunion era. No, 5 still. Reunion era albums over probably the 5 classic era ones. It just, except for Seventh Son, I mean, most of them, they're great live, but I don't know, on the album,
Yeah.
The fact that, and Bruce bouncing back, I mean, it's one thing to beat cancer. It's another thing, throat cancer for your singer. And that, the way he sounds, on this, still sounds great. Hopefully, he can, sustain over a tour. So, because an Iron Maiden show is just a great experience, and he has so much energy, and he's just in great shape for being
absolutely
pushing 60, and it puts a lot of people to shame.
And that's going to be the real test for him, is the live show, because not to detract at all from what Bruce has done battling cancer and coming back, but at the end of the day, in the studio, especially when you have the money and resources of Iron Maiden, you can spread it out over as many days, take as many takes as you want, do it however you want. It's a lot easier to give a great studio performance, obviously, than it is to night in and night out give a great live performance.
The good thing that they do is when they tour, they don't play 5 shows in a week. They play, a show every 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
So that might help.
And part of that has to do with the giant airship that they take around. The big announcement before the tour dates were announced, the big announcement was what fucking plane they were going to be flying around.
No, not what plane they were going to be flying. What plane Bruce was going to be flying.
Yes.
Let's be honest. Ed Force One. The return of Ed Force One.
But yeah, there was. I made jokes to friends that oh good, the Iron Maiden fans finally have their big news. They know what plane's going to be flying around.
Yeah, so I was listening to I think Chris Jericho has a podcast,
which of course isn't nearly as good as when Prog and Power Unite.
Right, but he had Bruce Dickinson on his podcast, if I'm remembering this correctly, and it was about a 40-minute or so interview on the new album, and I'm pretty sure Bruce said on that show that the band were probably never going to play Empire of the Sky live.
Yeah, I remember that. It was quite depressing. Actually, a funny story, we were going to have Bruce on when Prog and Power Unite, but then he said he got sick with cancer or something. He made some excuse.
But that's just, seriously, that's a pet peeve of mine with Iron Maiden, is they have so many great songs that they're never, ever going to play live.
Yeah, one of the ones I think he actually mentioned, or Nico might have mentioned in an interview too, was Alexander the Great, another long song that's never been played live.
Never going to play it, probably.
Probably not. It's unfortunate.
There's a statistic or something, right? They've never played a song live if they didn't play it on the original tour for that album.
I was just about to say that is indeed a true Iron Maiden fact. If it didn't get played on the original tour, it has never been played. They have never broken that rule.
Yep. So. It's depressing.
Yeah, I mean, and part of me thinks, as long as they keep supporting new music and keep being innovators, I can't blame them too much for that. As long as they, kind of keep promoting the new stuff as heavily as they have been, I give them more leeway as long as they have that freshness in the set. My big concern comes when there's neither new music in the set nor anything rare, and it's just the same songs that you're used to hearing. Yeah.
Hey, Nick, now that I think about it, I think you probably told me that statistic before an Iron Maiden show a couple years ago. I think you're who I learned that from.
Well, that's okay. I certainly didn't come up with that statistic, so I got it from somewhere on the interwebs, I'm sure. No worries there. So that's a good take on the Book of Souls there, and let's go to our last topic, a nice general topic that I know. I've been thinking which of my stories I want to tell, but I know you guys each have a story rip-raring and ready to go. So, Joe, let's start with you. Our topic is bad concert experiences.
I had one ready to go?
Yeah, Blind Guardian.
That wasn't bad. That was awesome.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, all right. Okay, Mason, go.
I have a comment, but I'll let Mason go first.
Yeah, so this isn't when I'm talking about bad concert experience, I'm not talking about the band. Ghost was great, but because Ghost does seem to be starting to get this, part of this mainstream audience, I think. So at the Ghost show, people were being pretty stupid. I showed up after when the doors opened. I sat, through the opening act, and I was essentially in the third row. It was a general admission crowd, but there were only about two people in front of me, for the opening act. And when the opening act ended, person ended, and even during the intermission, not much was going on. And then when Ghost came on, all these people thought that they deserved rail, and you're just like, no, you can't just push your way to the front because you want to. If you want a front row seat at general admission, you get there early. That's the rule. Be considerate. That drove me nuts, and people pushing me back. I'm a big guy, but I'm also have a pretty good job, and I would lose it if I got into any sort of police thing. So I was allowing myself to kind of get pushed back. And then there was a mosh pit, and people had drinks, alcoholic drinks, who weren't moshing, but these moshers are just running into people. I had these two little, I call them little, they were teenage girls, but they didn't have drinking bracelets on, so they had black X's. So I knew they were young, and they were literally trying to hide behind me because a few people decided that they were going to have fun. That they didn't care what anybody else's experience was. All they cared about was their self, and it was, I sound like an old man. I'm pushing 37, but it's, get off my lawn. Yeah, it's same. I mean, it's, we all paid the same amount of money to see a show. If you want to have fun, awesome. Yell, sing along, pump your fists, show horns, great. Just, be respectful of everyone else.
Yep.
And if you get there late, or you don't want to sit through the first, opening acts, then deal with being in the back.
I'm going to run off of that and do two general etiquette rules I think everyone at a concert should follow, especially a metal concert. First, in regard to yours, I have no problem with sitting in the back of the opening act, all that, and then coming up, as long as you come up to the point where you meet, decent resistance, there's a certain thickness of people, and you stop. You don't try and push your way up as far as you can go. You go up as far as reasonably possible, and that's your spot, and you deal with it.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you show up early, god damn it.
Yeah, I expected it to get tighter, but I didn't expect to go from, third row to, at that point I couldn't even, count. And if you've, probably you're the only Facebook friend with me, Nick. But if you look at my picture on Facebook, I'm clearly not that close to the front.
Yeah. By
the time Ghost gets on, and it's like,
And you reminded me of one of my bad concert experiences. I'm going to go back several years ago, probably about 5-6 years-ish, to seeing Symphony X in New York City. I can actually date the show by knowing it was before Paradise Lost came out. It was like a pre-released show for Paradise Lost. It was at B.B. King's, and my big problem with that show was I was in the second row. I wasn't on the rail, but I was directly behind the rail. And people started a mosh pit, and I'm okay with mosh pits at shows. But this mosh pit went through the area between the second and the fifth row, right in the middle. Okay, and my problem with this is people who get there early to get up front, who are on the rail or near the rail, are there because they want to see the band. You want to start a mosh pit? Fine. Do it back in a corner or in the back somewhere. Don't do it right up front where people who really want to see the show are trying to see the show. I had a very bad time there for 2 or 3 songs because I was trying to avoid people running into me. So, Joe, you said you had a comment?
Yeah, and I think, like, I have no problem with moshing at shows. I think some aggression is to be expected with a lot of these heavy metal bands. But the thing I will say is I think a lot of these bands are playing in venues that are much smaller than where they used to, and maybe these venues are kind of like overbooked to a certain extent. So like Nick, I know a lot of bands used to play at the Electric Factory, which seats like 2,000 people or something here in Philadelphia. And now you see those same bands playing at Union Transfer or TLA, which are like 1,000 people venues. It's like the same amount of people at the show, but everyone's like crammed together. So if 5 or 6 people decide they want to mosh, it affects the whole audience. And that's really my only comment. I think maybe it's just, the venues.
Yeah, and I like I said, I'm not anti-mosh either, and I have moshed. Granted, I don't mosh to things like Symphony X or Ghost. It was Metallica or really heavy stuff. Enslaved was a great mosh band, but I don't know. Again, it's just be aware of your surroundings. Particularly, like I said, if you're still in other people's beer, not only on them but other people. I felt really weird having these 18, 17-year-old girls kind of being pushed up against me because they were trying to get away from getting elbowed in the head. And
yeah,
it was. But I'm looking. Like Joe went to see Blind Guardian. I'm looking forward to seeing them at the end of the month. They're coming to Orlando, and I saw Symphony X recently as well. Unfortunately, they were opening for Overkill, and I'm not familiar with Overkill at all. It's probably the first time I went to see a band, to see the opening band. And
well, just one thing real quick on that, just for sake of factual correction. They weren't opening for Overkill. They were doing what Dream Theater and Queensryche did back in the day, and a few other bands have done.
Yeah.
They were co-headlining some shows.
Yeah.
Symphony X opened some shows, Overkill opened. They actually playing the same amount of sets, so they're actually co-headlining.
Yeah. Well, it's still they went on first, and so I was,
Yeah.
But,
I just don't want people to get the impression that if they go to see the show, they're going to see Symphony X do a half hour. That's not the case.
Yeah. No. They play full set. But
okay. Well, this I thought was a good first run at everything, and I hope you enjoyed hearing our different topics. I can say next time I think I already know one of our topics for next time is going to be Transatlantic and the future of that band. And running over it now, we talked about a lot of heavy topics, so I think next time we'll probably focus on a few more prog bands, most likely. In any case, I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, in the show notes, there will be links to lots of the things we talked about, and I hope that you're able to continue to listen to these in the future. If you have a particular topic you would like discussed, please leave us a comment either on Facebook or on the post on our website, and let us know what you'd like us to talk about next time. And I thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we'll see you around this time next month. Thank you.